Look at that sun. It's so sunny and I love it so much. I know I look a bit shadowy, but I just couldn't resist the urge of filming in natural daylight instead of using a light or anything, so I hope you don't mind. But today's video is going to be obviously my end of the month wrap up. We're going to discuss everything I read and what I thought of them, if I recommend them, but also my TBR for March. This time I've done something a little bit different. I asked YouTubers to pick my TBR, so make sure you stick around to see what they picked, but let's get into it. I actually can't believe it's March. This year is flying by. I can't believe we're 3 months into year already. It's almost going to be time for Q1 wrapped, and I feel like 2025 only just begun. But anyway, in February I read 4 books, which is not very common for me at all. I usually average about 8. Last year, I would say my average each month was around 8. The year before that, my average was like 10 to 16. So I don't know what's happening to me, but as I get older, apparently I read less and less per month. And at the end of the day, 4 books is still a very, very decent amount. Any books is a decent amount. Some months just be like that and you just don't know where the time's gone, and before you know it, it's the end of the month and you haven't read a lot. But my first book of February was another Ali Jimenez, because I've become a stan, but this one was a novella, and that was The Fall Risk. It is just a novella, like I say. It's like 80 pages, so there isn't too much for me to comment on and criticize or praise. It's obviously never going to be as in-depth as a full-length romance novel, but I will say that for a novella, she did manage to pack a surprising amount of backstory, and that backstory was again really quite deep and very interesting and unique, because it was about dealing with a stalker. And no, not the haunting Adeline kind of stalker. She didn't want a stalker, okay, to clarify. But yeah, like I said, she has a stalker, and so it does deal with that as well as the romance. I really enjoyed it. I was surprised by how much was in such a short story, so I gave it 4 stars. Then we had one of my most anticipated releases of this year, which was Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I do think I'm going to do a full review on this, because it does seem to be a little bit of a polarising book, which I wasn't really expecting. But I will say that overall I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. Is it my favourite Ali Hazelwood book? No, but it still delivered a really fun, interesting read, and I absolutely loved Lucas as a love interest. Then I went on to a romantasy that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. I did include it already in my underrated romantasy books, which I'll link above, so you can go and see my full thoughts on it. But the book was Ruin by Gillian Eliza West, and it is book 1 in the Infernus duology. Book 2, which is obviously the final book, does come out very, very soon. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised by this. Again, is it my favourite romantasy ever? No, but it did have lots of strengths and I still really, really enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. And then my final book of February was a book that I never planned to read. It hadn't even been on my radar, and the reason for that is because I'd actually already read it 2 years ago. And when I read it, I didn't particularly enjoy it. In fact, I thought it was bang average, and I said that I wasn't going to continue the series. Tell me why, since reading that book 2 years ago, I have consistently thought of the 2 main characters in it over and over again, especially the love interest. He really sticks out in my mind as a unique love interest, and he's the kind of love interest I'd love to see more of. He wasn't necessarily your typical, like, super powerful, brooding, angsty male. Well, actually, he kind of is, but not in the way you're thinking. Basically, the book was Daughter of No Worlds. So if you've read it, you understand what I mean about Max. He loves to tend his garden. He's dealing with sort of PTSD. He's just a little bit unique, and I loved that. So I did make the decision to reread it and try and continue the series. I have to say that I enjoyed my reread so much more than my original read of the story. When I first read it, I liked the characters, like I said, but I found the world building and the magic system basically like underdeveloped. I didn't feel like I understood the limitations around the magic, how it fully worked, how each person's is unique, like how they get their powers. The history of the world wasn't really explored fully for me, and I didn't understand the origins of the conflict. Basically, I just felt like the fantasy side of things was lacking. I did also find that the reveals at the end were very clunky and confusing, and so the ending did fall flat for me. Another problem I had with it on the original read was that I felt the pacing was really slow in the middle, and that overall the book was just too long for a first book in a series. This time, I did not find it boring at all. In fact, I thought the pacing was actually quite consistent all the way through, and I don't know if my thoughts on that have just changed either based on my mood at the minute or based on the fact I've read more high fantasy since. But the pacing was one thing that didn't bother me at all. I also really enjoyed the romance and the characters. I did enjoy that the first time around, but I enjoyed it even more the second time around. I do still think there are problems with the fantasy elements, but overall my enjoyment was slightly higher than before, so I have gone on to book 2. But on my reread of Daughter of No Worlds, I changed the rating from 3.75 to 4.25. So before we get into the fun part of YouTubers picking my reads for March, I want to tell you about the ones that I absolutely have to read. Some it's because I've already started, and some it's because they are advanced reader copies. My necklace just fell off and it's broken, so we're down to 1. Anyway, the first book that I absolutely have to read, because I'm already partially through it, is Fable for the End of the World by Reid. This is their upcoming sapphic YA dystopian release. I'm a huge fan of Ava's. I've read their other books. Juniper and Thorn and A Study in Drowning were both 5 stars for me, and A Study in Drowning is a book that I think about continuously, so I do have a good history with their YA books. The premise is similar to Hunger Games, in which there are assassins who citizens, but it's shown on live television for people to watch. And from the beginning, I have to say, the mood that is created by Ava is very bleak and very morbid, especially because one of our main characters works with dead bodies. I'm really excited to get further into it. The writing is stunning as always, and like I said, the premise that has been set is actually really intriguing. Although I say it's similar to Hunger Games, it actually doesn't feel too samey at all. The second book on my March hopefuls, because again I am already partially through it, is Legendborn. Now I have read this before. This is a reread via audio because I want to go on to book 2 so that I can read Oathbound when it comes out. I have to say I am enjoying my reread a lot. I forgot how good this book is. It's so jammed full of unique fantasy elements and really interesting characters, and it has such an addictive plot. If you haven't read it yet, you absolutely have to. Another book I would like to get to if I have the time is The Charlie Method, which is Elle Kennedy's latest hockey romance. Again, I have read the previous books in the series, which is The Graham Effect and The Dixon Rule. Elle just never lets me down. Like, I love her hockey romances so much. They're fun, they're easy, but they often do have a side plot as well as the sports romance that keeps you emotionally connected to the characters. This one is going to be a little bit different though, because I believe it's a throuple. I have never read a romance book that's a throuple. I've read Why Chooses, where it's like one woman and like 4 or 5 men, but never a throuple. So we'll see what I think of that. I have seen a couple of 5-star reviews for it already, so I am hopeful. I have been lucky enough to be granted with another arc to read in March, and that is The Exorcism of Faeries by J.L. Vampa. Again, if you haven't seen my underrated romantasy recommendation, go and watch it because I talk about her other book, Autumn of the Grimoire. I'm very excited for The Exorcism of Faeries because it sounds really unique, but is set in Trinity College in Dublin. And if you don't know, I had the opportunity to go there on holiday last year and I fell in love with it. I feel like it's also just the perfect dark academia setting for something about fae or fairies or just magic in general. So I'm very excited to that. I hope to get to that very soon. Like I said, I'm already reading book 2 of the Daughter of No World series, which I believe the actual name of the series is War of the Lost Hearts or something like that. But I'm on book 2, which is Children of Fallen Gods, and I'm like 25-30% of the way through. So far, I have mixed feelings, but like I said, I will update you more on that next time. Now let's talk about what YouTubers have picked for me. So I have asked 3 very, very trusted sources, mutuals, friends to pick me 3 books just because of how slumpy I was last month. I need their best recs to get me out of this hole. The first person I asked was Luce's Library. She's a queen. We have very similar taste. Romantasy, fantasy, romance, all of that good stuff. And a lot of the books that she loves, I also love. But there is one book of hers that she has been raving about for ages that I still haven't managed to get to, but is on my physical TBR, and that is When the Moon Hatched, and she has picked that for me. I literally know nothing about this book other than it is NA or adult romantasy, and I think there's dragons, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people absolutely love the love interest, but other than that I don't know anything. I don't really know what the plot is. I don't know if it's fae, I don't know if it's vampires, like it could be anything for all I know. I've never read a full book by this author too. I did start her other book, which is To Bleed a Crystal Bloom, I think, and I immediately really liked her writing style because it's very descriptive and almost flowery, which is my vibe. I love a lyrical writing style. I know a lot of people don't, but I do. I want you to utilise all of my senses and make it feel like poetry. So I am excited to see if that writing style is consistent in When the Moon Hatched as well. So thanks, Luce. If you don't follow her, you definitely should. She's on here making absolutely amazing YouTube videos. The next YouTubers I asked to pick a book for my TBR were Kris and Mads. I've had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with them, speaking to them a lot, and I know that our tastes are very aligned in some ways. They are some of the creators that I go to specifically for high fantasy or sci-fi recommendations because they read it a lot more frequently than I do. And the book they picked just so happened to also be our Fable Book Club poll winner for the month, and that is Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wang. I am so excited for this because I read Sword of Kaigan last year and it was one of my few 6-star reads of 2024, and I have not seen a single person be let down by this one, Blood Over Bright Haven. I think it's a standalone and I think it is fantasy and like dark academia, so I'm very excited to see how it differs from Sword of Kaigan or how it's similar, but I am pretty certain that this is going to be a banger for me. And then finally, my queen, Bailee, picked me a gothic paranormal romance, which again, I'm thrilled about because last year she recommended me Tales of Weeping Hollow series by Nicole Fiorina, and that ended up being something that pulled me out of my like romantasy hole. Again, it is in my underrated romantasy recommendations video, so you can go and learn more about that. But just know that book 1 was a 4.5 star rating for me and book 2 was a 5. So for her to give me another one in that kind of genre, I'm very excited. The book is Nocticadia, I think. I don't know how you say it, but this one by Kerry Lake. And I'm very excited. I do have her other book, Anathema, on my TBR, but I hadn't considered this one for this year. And it is something a little bit different, so I am excited. I think it's a dark academia, gothic, paranormal romance. I believe it might be student teacher as well, which I kind of love as a trope. I don't know if that's controversial to say, but when I do read it, professor student, I love it. Like Zodiac Academy, Lance and Darcy. I love it. Not when it's icky though. They can't be too young. But hopefully this one delivers another paranormal romance success for me. Thank you so much, Bailee, for picking me one. Make sure you go and subscribe to her if you aren't already, but I'm sure you are because she creates the best videos. But that is everything I am hoping to read in March, and that is everything that I read in Feb. A bit of a short and sweet one this time. Hopefully next month is a little bit more in depth and there's a little bit more to tell you about, more exciting reviews to come, especially if the recommendations from my favourite YouTubers succeed. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment. Please tell me if you've read any of my March hopefuls. I would love to know your opinions so I can go into them prepped. But I will see you next time for another video on a Monday. Love you. Bye.